Years ago.
Not like
It was
that.
just boom like that.
I mean, it's a everyday occurrence.
Members, everyone, thank you for attending today's Civil Justice Full Committee hearing. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
Representatives Bricken, Bolso, Capley, Eldridge, Gant,
Here.
Garrett, Grills, Harris, Lamberth, Littleton, Parkinson, Powell, Russell, Stevens, Todd, Vice Chairman Jernigan, Chairman Farmer.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, have any personal orders before we start? Representative Capley, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have my constituents here from Murray County, my alma mater, Zion Christian Academy. The senior classes join us here in the committee rooms. Just want to make them feel welcome. Y'all give them a round of applause, please.
Yeah, we appreciate you all being here. Representative Garrett, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a lot of fine folks in Sumner County today, but on behalf of Leader Lamberth and me, we have the finest folks that are here from Leadership Sumner Group. They're in the back. If y'all would wave, if we could welcome here. Thank you all for being here from Leadership Sumner.
And thank you. Members, any other personal orders before we start today? We do have a calendar. All right, with that said, we're going to roll item 1 to the Hill without objection. That'd be HJR 756. That's our appointment of Mr. Hamilton to the Claims Commission, represented by Representative or Chairman Grills, without objection. And we're going to go ahead and take up item 2, which is House Bill 1717 by Representative Gillespie. So you've got a motion and a second, and I don't see an amendment, so it looks like you're good to go.
Thank you so much, Chairman, for going out of order there. And thank you, committee. This is pretty straightforward. In Shelby County, we have really a out of control crime issue going on. And there have been times in the past year or so to where our elected county commission has requested politely certain information from our judicial commissioners, and they're just not playing nice. And all this would do would be to require them, the judicial commissioners, to supply relevant information to the county commission upon request within a certain time period. And that's really all this is. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Very good, and thank you for that explanation. Members, do we have any questions or comments for Representative Gillespie? Seeing none, are we ready to vote? Looks like we are. Okay, without objection, we're going to vote to send House Bill 1717 to Calendar and Rules. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it.
Thank you all.
Unanimous. With that, that brings us back to item 1. That's HJR 756 by Chairman Grills. Got a motion, got a second, sir. You're welcome. Mr. Hamilton, if you would, I'll go ahead and let you move up and sit there in that front table while Representative Grills is presenting this HJR.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate having you here today, sir, and your lovely wife, Becky, back there. So with that said, Representative Grills, you're probably recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Mr. Jim and how I know him. He's one of the standard bearers in our community. He's a gentleman among gentlemen. You can go anywhere and you can bring his name up and you will not have to worry about getting hit. I mean, he's a fantastic guy. He's the type of guy you could go into a bank and borrow money on his name. I'm, you look at, when you look at these bios and all, and you see all the qualifications that people have, that's fantastic. But the character that Mr. Jim displays on a regular basis is just fantastic. And our community is is grateful for he and his family residing there. And I'm happy to call him my friend and often run by and get advice from him. So with that, I'll let him respond if you will be willing to go out of session.
Members, any objection for us going out of session here from Mr. Hamilton? Seeing none. All right, we're out of session. Mr. Hamilton, if you don't mind, sir, just be sure that the red light's on your microphone there. Members, as I understand it, this is a reappointment. I believe Mr. Hamilton was recent, or was last appointed by Governor Haslam. I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Hamilton. Seems like a wonderful candidate into this, and I don't know that any of us may have not had the opportunity to get to ask him questions and hear about himself, his family, what he's done, how he's enjoyed the Claims Commission, and his just skills in life that makes him a good candidate for reappointment. So with that said, Mr. Hamilton, you got 3 minutes to cover some of those things for us, and then we may have some questions for you, sir.
I'll be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. As Representative Grill said, I was appointed to the Claims Commission for West Tennessee in 2015. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a privilege and an honor to serve. Governor Lee has suggested that I be reappointed, and subject to your approval, I would very much like to continue in that capacity. I practiced law for about 35 years before being appointed. I grew up in Trenton. I went to law school, went to UT Martin undergraduate, went to law school at Cumberland Law School down in Birmingham. Came back, had a job opportunity in Dyersburg, went straight to Dyersburg and been there ever since. Met and married my wife, Becky, who is from Dyersburg, and we've got a couple of grown daughters, 3 grandsons, so life's good. And I'd be happy to, I thank you for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can about the Claims Commission.
Very good. We appreciate your comments, sir. Members, do we have any comments or questions? Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I hate to sound ignorant, but it's pretty easy. What does the Claims Commission do?
It is essentially a court. It's referred to as an administrative tribunal because it was set up by legislation. But we come under the Claims Commission Act, which allows lawsuits, tort claims, negligence claims to be brought against state employees. So as you're aware, the state is immune from lawsuits, except for the Claims Commission, where exceptions have been carved out. So we hear negligence claims, we hear breach of contract claims, we hear criminal injury compensation claims, workers' comp claims. So it in essence works like a court. We have what we call a small claims docket, which is $25,000 or less. That's very similar to general sessions, except we don't hear live testimony. All that evidence is presented through affidavits, and then the commissioner will make a decision based on the proof that's presented. We have a regular docket claim, which is more than $25,000, and that works essentially the same as a circuit court lawsuit. The only difference being is that the commissioner makes the decision. You don't have a jury. So it's in essence just a court, a means where state employees who have been negligent can be, where a suit can be brought.
Any follow-up, Representative Bricken? Members, do we have any other questions or comments for Commissioner Hamilton? Leader Lambert, you recognize, sir.
Mr. Chairman, only to say that is one of the best descriptions I've probably ever heard from someone given the Claims Commission, and it was a pop quiz at that. So if for no other reason, I think he's extremely well qualified just given the description he gave. So thank you.
Very good. And thank you, Leader Lambert. Members, anyone else? All right. Looks like are we finished with our guest? Looks like we are. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you.
Appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
All right. Without objection, we're going to go back in session. All right. Now we're back in session. We've got HJR 756 in front of us, presented to us by Representative Grills. Do any members have any questions for Representative Grills? All right. Looks like the question's been called. Looks like we're going to be voting on recommendation of Mr. Hamilton for reappointment to the Claims Commission by HJR 756. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Congratulations, sir. And that brings us to the conclusion of today's calendar. Excuse me. Looks like we have a presentation and an update from the Department of Children's Services members. So folks, if you all go ahead and make your way up. And members, without objection, if we could go out of session to hear from the Department of Children's Services, without objection. And I believe you all know the drill. Just We got 3 minutes each, just, or well, yeah, let's go ahead and just make your presentation and we'll have time for questions. So
Sounds good.
just be sure your mics are on and we'll go from there.
Get it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Jim Lehman. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Children's Services. And we have with us Pierce Beckham, our Deputy Chief of Staff, as well as Doug Diamond, our General Counsel, and a large number of our program experts and leadership across the state are here with us as well from the Department of Children's Services. Thank you all for the opportunity to be in front of you here today. About half of you got to listen to some more general operational updates from the department and commissioner last week in the Child and Family Affairs Subcommittee. Today, we're going to be talking about some recent updates and changes throughout the last year and a half of updates to our policies. There's actually a statute that requires that we provide info to you all on updates to our policies, so we are happy to do that. All of our policies that the department uses are actually available online on the department's website. We also provide monthly emails to Chairman Farmer and Chairman Gardenhire in the Senate with changes from the previous month. So any policies that have been updated over the previous month, we provide those to them. And so we're happy to provide those to anyone that may want them. And then finally, we also do a comprehensive annual report on all of our policy changes that we submit to the Government Operations Committee in July of every year. That's something that all departments have to do. And so we're happy to do that as well. So we've actually used that report as a template for a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. That report, the reporting period was from July 1 of 2022 to July 1 of 2023. So we're going to cover that as well as some more recent updates as well. So we're only going to be using for our purposes the first couple slides, but then the slides that remain after those are the full comprehensive report of all the policies that have changed over the previous year. So feel free to review that. Policies are very important to the operation of our department. We have about 3,500 employees across the state. And putting things down in policy helps ensure that the children and families that we deal with are treated equally and consistently across the state. So we have a very extensive policy portfolio. So we won't be able to talk about all of our policies today, but we do hope to hit some highlights of some of the more important recent changes. But before we do that, I did want to kick it over to Pierce to talk a little bit about our process for reviewing and revising those policies before we get into some of the highlights.
So we wanted to give an overview of how many policies the department actually has. We separate them into 22 chapters. That includes internal operations such as human resources and facilities, but the majority of them are the direct services that we provide to clients: child protective services, juvenile justice, foster care, foster parent support, etc. Whenever this body passes new legislation, we get input from the field that something has arisen that is becoming consistent across the state, or in our internal continuous quality improvement activities, those will prompt a change to policy. That is assigned to some of the subject matter experts behind us. They assemble a team. They may reach out to community partners, private providers, other experts locally and nationally to come up with an appropriate response that is then reviewed by that office's leadership. No policy can be changed without the deputy commissioner of that office signing off on it. Then it is kicked over statewide to a policy review committee that has a broader viewpoint, provides input, and then we post it publicly. We do send emails out internally and to our providers announcing when policies are posted. They stay up for 14 days, and every comment that we received is required to be responded to. So that may prompt a change in revision of policy. It may be a consideration that was already taken under advisement, and we will provide that feedback to someone. Then it goes to our executive leadership team. Any one person can put a hold on a policy out of the deputy commissioners and assistant commissioners. until those issues are resolved before finally being presented to the commissioner for her signature and sign off.
Great. So I picked a few areas to talk about with you all here today, and these are, areas of focus from this past year. This is from the actual report that we submitted to government operations. So again, the reporting period is July 1 of 22 to July 1 of 2023. And then after that, like I said, Pierce will discuss some more recent updates. So 4 main areas here: accreditation updates, addressing audit findings, assisting families, and then finally, employee work-life balance. In total, 64 policies were updated and 33 associated documents were updated. In some cases, there were multiple revisions to the same policy or document. So let's start with the accreditation updates. The Council on Accreditation is our accrediting body for the majority of our operations at DCS. We have 12 regions, and each region individually, as well as central office, are individually accredited. In 2022, there were some revisions to the COA standards, which necessitated us changing several policies. I have at least 7 policies that were changed because of those. Those included updates to our early periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment standards, as well as updates to the WorkAid on CPS investigative tasks and activities. Then with the American Correctional Association standards, these apply at the Wilder Youth Development Center, our hardware secure facility that the department operates for serious delinquent offenders. We actually moved from COA to ACA accreditation for Wilder over the last year because we felt that the ACA standards were more appropriate for Wilder, offered more therapeutic options, and provided more support for our security staff there. So we became fully accredited at Wilder under these ACA standards on January 1st, 2023. So moving to that different accreditation standard necessitated us changing and adding to several different policies. I have that we updated at least 20 policies during this time related to these ACA standards. These include, I've got just a few here, professional development and training requirements, program audit process and monitoring, suicide, self-harm prevention and intervention, healthcare delivery, administration of food services, substance abuse screening for delinquent youth, as well as many different others. So moving to that different sort of accreditation standard necessitated several policy changes for us. The next big topic area was this addressing audit findings area. We had several policy changes that we made to address audit findings. Our most recent audit from the comptroller was released in December of 2022, and we changed several things in order to help us remediate those findings. So I'll hit on a couple of those. Employee background checks, some revisions there, and revisions related to volunteering and driver's licenses. Our protocol for delegated authority sitter service vetting. So we utilize professional sitter services at transitional homes across the state, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second. We use those in order to provide relief to DCS staff who are sitting with children awaiting placement. So this policy regards vetting those services. Another one was our protocol for accessing a transitional home. We actually initiated that one and then provided an update later in 2022. One of the things that the comptroller found in the audit was that the quality of these facilities and amenities in them sort of varied across the state. So we created a policy to make sure that those spaces being used were more consistent throughout the state and were a good and appropriate place for children and staff to be while they awaited placement. We now utilize, I believe, over 30 transitional spaces across the state. Fortunately, very recently, we've been able to use some of those less and less because We've actually had many nights over the last few weeks where we've had less than 30 children in transitional homes overnight across the state. And that's really a great thing for us. Several months ago, there were many nights where we had over 80 children in transitional homes across the state. So that's been really good and encouraging for us. We also updated some protocols related to PREA, that's the Prison Rape Elimination Act. That was also related to an audit finding, so we made some revisions there to make sure we were following what we should be. The third area here, assisting families. A big portion of what we do is take care of all the children in state custody and foster care. So always different policy changes coming related to foster parents and that kind of thing. We did have a change related to responsibilities of foster parents that added new types of efforts which may be used to locate an alleged child victim and family, revises expectations around monthly foster home visits and documentation, including updates in training, verifications, and medications. It also explains the process to document medical appointments, added a protocol for clothing allowance, and clarified that discipline should be age appropriate. For foster home selection and approval, we had a policy change that updated minimum requirements for proposed foster parents, provided guidelines for staff to assist potential foster parents through the application process, including identifying responsible staff. We updated our process for home approvals, including mandatory pre-service hours, documentation, and background checks. We also clarified our process for waivers of any requirements, including process and time frames for approval of new foster home placements. Foster home selection and approval. This policy included process for home approval requirements specific to military families, clarified the guidance and criteria and staff approval responsibilities for home assessments, and updated documentation requirements for denials. Child care and adoption assistance. You may know adoption assistance is provided to families who are able to adopt children out of state custody. And there were some recent federal changes there, new federal criteria for eligibility. So we updated some policies there. Child care assistance, so providing help with child care for foster parents. Expanding access and aligning with the Department of Human Services guidelines, some policies to make sure those were working together. We expanded the age of eligibility for adopted children for the child care assistance, updated the time frame for redetermination, and allowed for ongoing support in non-custodial cases. Relative caregiver program I have here. Happy to talk about this program. We made some updates here because there was some legislation and funding that you all passed in the 2022 session to help us start the new relative caregiver stipend program on January 1st, 2023. So we're very happy to have that program off the ground. In its first year, we served almost 1,500 children. And we're hoping to serve even more than that this year. So we had to update some policies to reflect, this new stipend program. And that program, if you don't recall, provides relative caregivers with a monthly stipend of half of what we would have paid a foster parent, so half of the full foster care board rate. And that really helps us, prevent children from coming into custody, remaining with the family and that kind of thing. So very happy to have that program and the policies that went along with implementing that. Kinship homes made several different updates to policy related to kinship homes, including non-custodial immediate protection agreements. That's something we use a lot to, again, try to prevent children from coming into custody. Some updates to our non-custodial waiver tip sheet. new areas in locating the child and family, new methods of locating, some new policies for expedited custodial placements, and then finally, child and youth referral and placement. So that's sort of the updates about policies there for kinship homes. And then finally, just a couple of policy updates for employee work-life balance. You know, Commissioner Quinn, in the year and a half that she's been here, has been a tireless advocate for our employees across the state, particularly our case managers, trying to, help them better serve the vulnerable children and families across the state, which has led to a really big improvement for us in employee retention, case manager retention. She talked about those numbers last week. But, where at the time of the audit findings, we had lost, almost, I think, 97% of first-year case managers. I think we're down to losing, less than 30% of them. So really big areas of improvement there for us. And so some policy changes that have helped lead to that. So capping caseload for new case managers that are in their first 12 months of service, and some new guidelines related to working days and working hours. So not working over 12-hour shifts and that kind of thing, because, there are occasionally times where, case managers may have to sit with children in those transitional homes. So making sure they're not working too many hours at a time and that kind of thing. So I've spoken enough. I'll let Pierce talk about some of the more recent policy changes.
Since the end of last legislative cycle, many bills came into effect July 1. And so we implemented policy changes to reflect those changes. Some of those areas, Jim, if you'll, thank you. Changes to our independent and extension of foster care policies took place, as well as the adoption and permanent guardianship rates and guidelines were updated. Archaeological dig is a way of framing some funds that were approved that allowed us a different way of accessing DCS records, other agency records, and public records to identify additional family members and kin of children that have been in foster care for a significant amount of time, to illuminate options for permanency that may have gone unnoticed while they've been in foster care. Our absconder and runaway policy was updated in response to a change in federal rule. They clarified what types of cases they would like state child welfare entities to coordinate with NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So we updated our policies in relation to that. The accreditation process with DCS is a multi-year process. And so as we continue to move forward and get feedback from our accreditors, we are continuing to update policies to reflect that feedback and best practice across the state. One of our chapters in Child Protective Services was completely revised. It was structured in such a way that over time, policies were stapled onto other policies. We had some duplication of direction. And if you read it from beginning to end, you would not know how to do the work of a Child Protective Service worker. So the Office of Child Safety took it on themselves to completely revise the policy, remove some of those documents, combine them into an operational manual for our frontline staff, as well as to structure it in such a way that someone going to our website and reading from beginning to end would get a full sense of the life of a case, coming from the child abuse hotline all the way through closure or transfer to foster care. We have updated rules and policies around staff safety. There have been incidents both in our offices and in transitional homes, as well as transporting of children. So we reviewed our policies to ensure that we are providing structure and guidance to our staff, and then also leveraging private security, as well as coordinating with other state agencies, which is still ongoing. We're coordinating currently with the Department of Homeland Security when we have an active shooter or a clear and present threat of danger to our staff. And we recently issued rules around drug screening of individuals. This was a policy that had been put on hold because it affects the rights of individuals. And of course, the legislature and the Secretary of State promulgated rules that anytime that a department has a policy like that, it cannot just stay a policy, it must be rules. So we went through the full rulemaking process and then issued internal policy, again, posted on the website to provide guidance to our staff around drug screening individuals. Substance abuse, unfortunately, still remains one of the most significant single reports of maltreatment that we see in the department.
And with that, Chairman, that kind of sums up what we were planning on talking about today as far as, our policy updates from the most recent year. Again, I included sort of our full policy report there. If you have time to review those and have any questions for myself or members of the legislative team at the department, we're happy to provide, any info on those. Again, we provide monthly emails to the chairman, and those are great because they kind of highlight, hey, these are the things that have changed in this policy and that kind of thing. So, let us know too. We're happy to provide those to any of you as well. And so with that, we're happy to answer any questions, Chairman.
And thank you for that. Members, I'm going to open up for questions and comments. I have Representative Gant on the list first. You recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you for y'all being here today. You had mentioned Wilder Development Center, and I know this has been a long process of involvement, with Wilder over the years. Can you give an update? Let me just kind of backtrack for a second. I know it was 2-3 years ago that I thought we had appropriated a certain amount of money for a new facility to be built somewhere. And I just kind of have lost track of where we're at in that process, because I know we've met many times since then and bounced many ideas with the governor and the administration on different ideas. So kind of, if you can bring me up to speed, because I get asked that question many times when I'm back in the district there in Somerville, what is happening with Wilder and what's the future of Wilder. So if you can help me on that. And then, Mr. Chairman, I have one other question, if you will give me the privilege of asking a second question after this.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the question. This is something we are very excited about. The money appropriated was for the design and planning of the new facility. And actually that has grown to 2 facilities, a hardware secure and a staff secure facility, to allow for therapeutic step down before going back into the community. We were excited to hear and see in the budget presentation from the governor that the remaining capital funds is in this year's budget request, and that would go to fully funding that the building of those 2 Wilder sites, as well as another site for our juvenile justice population in the middle of the state.
Okay. Representative Gant.
Okay. My second question is, you talked a lot about the employee retention, and do y'all, how do you get feedback from the department employees on work-life balance? I mean, do y'all survey them? I mean, how do you get your feedback?
So we do conduct surveys. We try not to over-survey our staff, so those are funneled through our Office of Continuous Quality Improvement. I oversee our training department, and at both in-service and pre-services, we always ask for input. Through monthly performance briefings with supervisors at every level. One of the questions that must be asked is, what do you need from us, and what can the department do for you? So that we get that on an individual basis. We also have a confidential reporting system. So if staff are not comfortable speaking out with their supervisor or going through some of those surveys, they can actually go online and report any concerns that they may have. And the only information that we gather is the location by region, so that we know if there is an issue, say, of we've had issues with landlords. We lease a lot of our buildings not fixing lights that come on at night. And so staff that are there after hours did not feel safe transporting children or going to their cars in some of the areas. Once we know where that is, we can go and speak with those landlords in those areas to make sure that those are remediated appropriately.
Okay. Any follow-up, Representative Gant?
Mr. Chairman, I had one other question that came to mind, and I apologize. Do
You're
you
fine.
mind if I ask that? Okay. Thank you for that answer. I'm going to shift gears to a different topic here. when dealing with foster parents, I think there's a rule or regulation that requires that foster parent, correct me if I'm wrong, that they be vaccinated. Can you expand on that?
Sure, and thank you for the question, Representative. There is a very limited law about vaccination requirements for foster parents, and it limits it to requirements for vaccinations for influenza and whooping cough for those who foster infants under 18 months old and medically fragile foster children as well. And that is from legislation, I believe that was put in 2021. It follows the national foster home model standards is kind of where that came from. Those standards are what we use in submitting to the government for our Title 4E plan. So that's sort of where those requirements come from.
Yeah, why would we not make it more a simple process by saying, hey, go to your doctor, get tested, and instead of, because we're infringing on some religious liberties for some families, and it seems like the simple common sense approach would say, just go to your normal practitioner and get tested for these and have your doctor submit us a report.
No, I certainly understand that. And, I think, happy to talk through more about the legislation whenever it's considered. But a couple of things. I would say that we would love to have, families that may have qualms with getting vaccinated and that kind of thing. We would just love to have them for anyone other than those infants and medically fragile. We have a huge need for foster parents in general, but that need is significantly less for infants. Well, I say the need. We have plenty of foster parents that are ready, willing, and able to take those infants that are under 18 months and that are also willing to get the vaccinations. So, we would tell folks that, have issues with getting vaccinated, please, please still be a foster parent just of those, children that are over 18 months old. And I think Commissioner would say too that, it's just a very vulnerable group, right? Like little infants and medically fragile children. And she wants, to do what we can to make sure that they stay safe and that kind of thing. So.
Was this a federal hand down that brings money into the department from the federal dollars if we adopt this? Was that where this came from?
It's my understanding that they are sort of standards that states use in, submitting their plan. And states may deviate from them and they may not. And I guess sort of if you do deviate from them, we don't know. Yeah, it's up to the feds whether or not they would approve it. So,
okay, you've been very gracious. Thank you so much.
Representative Parkinson, you're next on the list. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You caught me in mid cracker over here. I do have a couple of questions. One, who are you drug testing?
So we drug test parents. We drug test potential placements when there is a suspicion that they may be abusing substances. And there are times that we drug test children. Those drug tests can be a presumptive screen like a urinalysis. If we have concern of ongoing substance abuse, we also access hair follicles to see what substances a person may be using or have been exposed to.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, follow up.
Of course.
Okay, thanks. So tell me about your relative caregiver program.
yes, happy to, Representative. As I said, this was from legislation that passed in 2022. The program's actually been around for many, many years. We've been doing what we can to support relatives who are doing a great thing by stepping up to care for a child that may have otherwise entered into state custody. So historically, what I call our legacy program has helped provide diapers or a crib, or, provided all kinds of supports to make sure that that family could help that child. But what this new thing did was offer a cash stipend of equal to half of what we would have paid the foster parents. So half of our foster care board rate. And that way they can use those funds for anything for the child, just daily care, food, clothing, anything like that. And so, like I said, we served about almost 1,500 children in families across the state. Some of those families have multiple children that they're caring for. We utilize contracted providers throughout the state that help us with the case management. They're meeting with those families, making sure they're supported and all that kind of thing. And we actually have some legislation this year to clean up some of those requirements this is administration legislation, to clean up some of those requirements to make it even easier to access the relative caregiver stipend program.
Just a quick last one, Mr. Chair. if you
You're
don't mind.
recognized.
Thank you, sir. Can y'all help me understand why we would pay a relative half of what we would pay a stranger to be a foster parent?
So that is one of the things that we are looking to address, is to increase that rate to match the foster care board rate. We do feel very strongly that children are best served by family members. These are relationships that are longstanding. We have seen that those children either exit to those family members through adoption or custody, or they are able to return home more quickly. So we are looking to increase the rate and also to move up in time when parents, these relatives, can access those funds to support the children that they are taking on.
So basically, you're baffled by your own policy, because I was asking why would we pay relatives half the rate that we would pay a stranger to care for someone that's their relative?
Well, one, the policy matches the current language of the legislation. There are multiple relatives. Actually, our Office of Child Safety diverted 3,500 youth from custody by placing with relatives in last calendar year, and only about 1,500 access the relative caregiver program. Not every family wants or needs that money to support the family, but we recognize that if we are going to support children that the department is involved with, that we've identified those abuse and neglect issues, and continue to serve them, it shouldn't matter if they're in a foster home, a stranger, or in a relative's home. We should be supporting them equally. In fact, many of our relative caregivers in the past, under our legacy program, became foster parents. We do what is called full disclosure. Anytime we are interacting with a family, they can be a non-custodial placement, they could accept custody of a child, or they could be a kinship foster placement and go through the entire process and act and be treated as a foster home. And many of our families chose that route because of financial burdens of taking on 3, 5 children to keep them out of a stranger's home.
Very good.
Thank you
Okay.
for not answering, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If I
Representative
could.
Capley, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my colleague from West Tennessee asked part of my question, so I've got to follow up and see how we go, Mr. Chairman. My first question is, can you kind of expand a little bit on the drug screening and just kind of explain to me a little bit more about that? Is that a base level drug screening process, or is it based off suspicion? How does that work?
So we operate under a reasonable suspicion standard. In reviewing our policy and practice, we actually borrowed from the Department of Corrections a lot of their operating procedures. We receive reports of parents that are considered to be under the influence. These may come from law enforcement, and they've done a field sobriety test and determined that they were under the influence. Our drug screens allow for us to determine what that substance may be, or combination of substances. And then we would continue to drug screen to monitor to make sure that in treatment they are not relapsing, or if there is, that we are responding appropriately.
Representative Capley.
Would that be based off the minors as well?
Yes,
Okay.
and sometimes we're under court order, depending on the situation that brought the juvenile to the attention of juvenile court, if they had a possession charge or other charges that may be part of that juvenile order.
Any follow-up, sir?
Yes, sir. I have a second question. Can you give me kind of an update on staff safety and kind of what that looks like from your department? And I know you might have mentioned that there were some changes I was trying to follow as well. So if you could give me an update on that, that'd be great.
So we have addressed this both in a training through multiple facets. We have bundled a course of training that equips staff with de-escalation techniques to hopefully remove the threat of violence that is happening, as well as how to manage multiple children at once. It may be one child, and we don't want that to trigger or traumatize other children. So even spatially and situational awareness. We are continuing to advance those trainings. We're partnering with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations on that to further enhance. There are simple things that law enforcement knows that not all of our social workers know coming right out of college around when somebody is becoming angry, when someone may be reaching for a weapon, those signs to look for. We have updated both at Wilder and in the field when any sort of physical or handcuffs is appropriate to keep a child safe, to keep them from hurting themselves or others. And then we have contracted with private security, and we're utilizing them primarily in our transitional home settings right now to provide that extra presence when we have children staying in those places.
Representative Kelpie, any follow-up, sir?
Thank you for the explanation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Next, let's have Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to follow up on my West Tennessee colleague's question regarding the vaccine policy, I was just made aware of that particular exemptions for 18 months year. And also I want to understand the policy. So if I'm able and willing to foster a child that's under 18 months old, I don't get the flu shot. I've had it twice in my life and I've been sicker to death. And so I just don't get it. Right. So that would make me ineligible and my family because I choose not to take the flu vaccine. If there was a position that I was in, my family was in to foster a child under 18 months, you're telling me the policy is I couldn't accept that child because I don't take the flu shot?
Yeah. Representative, it's actually legislation. It's not policy. There's a state law about, I guess that the department may require vaccinations for, again, that limited group of under 18 months old and medically fragile for, again, just the flu shot and the whooping cough. But yeah.
So if that legislation would go away, then we're not subject to any funds from the federal government or not. That's just a policy that we've put in place for DCS that I assume DCS would support the fact that we need folks that want to foster kids under 18 months old need to get the flu shot.
Again, I guess it's kind of gray on whether or not funding would be impacted. The national model foster home standards include this vaccination requirement. Those standards are used by states in order to submit plans to the federal government that they approve or disapprove to provide the funding. So if we do not have that requirement, it's possible they could disapprove it. It's also possible that they could still approve it regardless that we didn't have that requirement.
What's the amount of the funding?
The 4E funding.
We would have to get back to you on the population because one of the concerns that the department has is it's the entire plan. They could disallow that one section and we would only lose 4E funding, the federal reimbursement, just for those youth that are in those placements, or they could revoke the entire plan, and we don't know how they would proceed.
Okay, I've got some real concerns about the fact that we don't allow a foster family that's able, willing, has healthy kids, healthy parents, because they don't get the flu shot. So I've got some real concerns about that. But thank you very much for your candor. I appreciate that.
And thank you. I just want to follow up real quick, Chairman, or excuse me, Leader Lambert, if you don't mind. Just two questions. One, I guess what I'm hearing, I just wanted to see if you can affirm this. So what I'm hearing is the department doesn't have any sort of bright line rule or mandate from the federal government that it's a requirement for any families that foster children under 18 months or under to have the whooping cough vaccine or the flu vaccine. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir. It is not bright line. It is gray and fuzzy.
Okay. Well, speaking of the gray and fuzzy, so are you telling me that, does the department have any guidance? So if you don't have a mandate from the federal government, is there any guidance in that gray area? Any recommended guidance from the federal government?
The guidance is from the standards, which includes that requirement, the national model foster home licensing standards. Yeah.
Our guidance has been that we know that they will approve it if a
Right.
state matches those guidelines. If a state wants to deviate, then it's a case by case, and we have to work with them. But ultimately, the federal government has the authority to say yes or no.
Okay, thank you. Leader Lambert.
Sorry to belabor the point on this one, but it interesting to get to the bottom of it. So how many other states do not require what we do there?
I do not know. I'd have to get back to you that on that.
If you don't
one.
mind just getting that to the chairman, he can get sure you get it to committee. I think there are several, and I don't know that they have lost any federal funding. But if y'all can look into that and kind of get back to us, that might be helpful to take it from a gray area to a relatively clear, bright line, because of other states have not had that requirement. And look, I share both the chairman and Representative Garrett's fervor on this. That, look, we need as many good families out there as possible, and there are obviously vaccines for children that are extremely helpful, polio vaccine and others that we want to make sure that for children they're taking. But for a good number of adults, there are vaccines that are obviously recommended, but it doesn't affect their ability to be a good parent at all. And so I just want to make sure that our pool of potential foster parents out there is as broad as possible, of good folks that want to bring in these children and give them good homes and make sure they're successful. So I just don't, I think none of us want any type of barriers to that that would keep an otherwise good family from being able to be a foster family. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll just start off and say I probably differ philosophically and politically in my opinions on vaccines, and appreciate good, sound public health policy. I wanted to ask though about mental health and what kind of services are being provided. For some of the different things that you described, and any sort of challenges to addressing is children in the system suffer sometimes severe, pretty traumatic trauma, and what kind of mental health resources are being provided and are available.
Thank you. We tailor every family permanency plan to the needs of those children, and it's updated routinely. Mental health is a key component of that. Foster children are in because of abuse and neglect. So and sometimes that is complex and long going before the department is aware of it and intervenes. We partner with community mental health agencies. We leverage our TennCare funds for that. And if there is needs on top of that, then we have state allocated funds through a delegated purchasing authority to access those funds. We also use community free services. Our child advocacy centers often are accompany a forensic interview with ongoing trauma-focused therapies, evidence-based models of children that have experienced the most significant and severe forms of child abuse. And most of those are free of charge. And if they need additional funding or support, wraparound services, the department will pay for that. Same thing with play therapy, which we find is very useful with children who are just developing verbal skills. They're able to act out and display in a controlled environment behaviors around the trauma that they've experienced. And in our foster care system, multiple providers provide continuums of care that provide residential, where they are staff secure. They have multiple group and individual counseling sessions of all varieties, stepping down into therapeutic foster homes where the foster parents are trained in evidence-based models like motivational interviewing to help de-escalate and address any trauma behaviors, as well as accessing community resources.
Representative Powell, any follow-up, sir? Very good. Next, let's have Representative Garrett. Do you have anything else? Members, or anyone else? We've exhausted the list. Great questions, great comments. Appreciate you all being here. So if no one else, we'll just excuse our guests. Once again, thank you. And without objection, go back into session. That's all we have for today. Members, have a motion to adjourn. Excuse me. Representative Parkinson, I apologize. Let's,
Just one thing, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think this was, and then I apologize, this is already done, but and our dear colleague, Bill Beck, served on this committee. You know, this was his, not just, served on this committee, but he was also an attorney himself and was committed to, doing right by the people of Tennessee. Tragically, as we know, we lost him last year. And I would just hope, Mr. Chairman, if we could just give a moment of silence for our colleague on this committee, Representative Bill Beck.
members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Certainly miss Representative Beck. Members, anything else before we adjourn? Seeing none. Or adjourn.